It was the summer of 1946, and East Texas had a problem. A problem that wore a mask, carried a knife, and stalked the streets after sunset. A terrifying specter that hacked lovers to pieces under the light of the gibbous moon. It was the Phantom Killer of Texarkana, and he was about to strike again. This is the history behind the slasher movie Friday the 13th. And now, we're going to get into some slasher history by telling the story of the town that dreaded sundown. Our story begins in Texarkana, a city straddling the border of Texas and Arkansas, two states that together make up one of the deadliest regions for women in the United States. From 1940 to 1942, 5 couples were murdered around Texarkana in what became known as the Phantom Killer case. These brutal attacks left 7 people dead and 4 wounded. The motive, robbery or sexual assault. The weapon, most likely a large knife. But there was no suspect and eventually no leads. And so the Phantom Killer became a local legend. For decades, this unsolved case went down in history as one of the most brutal and terrifying crime sprees in American history. Then, in 1974, it inspired one of the most successful horror films ever made, which in turn led to the creation of an entire subgenre of slashers. Hello, everybody. I'm here to bring you the stories behind the scares, and we're doing that today by taking a deep dive into the real-life crimes that inspired the fictional ones in Friday the 13th. Now, before we begin, I need to say this because, believe it or not, there's actually quite a bit of debate surrounding this particular urban legend and how much of it is true. Did 5 couples really get attacked in Texarkana? Were all 7 victims murdered with a knife, and were those murders even connected? Or are these theories just sensationalist nonsense that has grown up around the core of a very different reality? Well, what we do know is that there were at least 3 attacks. The first on April 26, 1946, when a couple parked in a secluded area along the U.S. Highway 67. The second on June 21, 1946, when a teenage boy and girl were attacked in a different secluded spot on the same highway. Both victims survived this attack, though they suffered severe injuries. And then the third attack on August 28, 1946, when another couple was murdered in their car, also on Highway 67. We don't know if there were more attacks because these 3 cases were the only ones that resulted in criminal charges being pressed. The victims of the first attack never reported it to the police. And who could blame them? Not only were they traumatized by what had happened to them, but they had been robbed, and the killer had threatened to return. Also, the police at the time seemed to think that this was a crime of passion, not murder. So it wasn't until the second attack that law enforcement took this seriously. In fact, the second attack was so vicious that the media dubbed the perpetrator the Phantom Killer. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of debate surrounding the details of this crime. Some say that a boy and a girl were attacked and murdered, while others claim that it was a young man and woman who survived the assault. In fact, the original police report doesn't specify the age or gender of either victim, only that there was a man and a woman involved. What we do know, however, is that the victims were both stabbed multiple times, but managed to escape into the nearby woods where they hid until sunrise, at which point they flagged down a passing motorist who drove them back into town and reported the crime. The 2 victims identified their attacker as a masked man wielding a large knife and standing around 6'2". The authorities responded by launching a massive manhunt, but they found no trace of the culprit. That would be until August, when another couple was parked in their car on the same stretch of road where the first 2 attacks had happened. Except this time, unlike the other victims, these 2 were killed. The killer approached their car, ripped open the door, and slit the woman's throat from ear to ear. He then turned his attention to the man, stabbing him repeatedly before fleeing into the night. It was only after this third murder that investigators connected the dots and realized they had a serial killer on their hands. They began to search the area for more victims, and they soon found 2, a couple who had been discovered missing after their car had been abandoned on the side of the road. After realizing that all 5 deaths were linked, the authorities began searching for a suspect. They started with Julia Tandy, a 20-year-old prostitute who claimed that she had been with a client the night that the first couple was murdered. She told police that her pimp, a man named John L. Robinson, had been out of town at the time, but that she had seen him return with a bloody knife. When officers searched Robinson's house, they found the bloodied clothes and shoes that matched the description of those worn by the Phantom Killer. He was arrested and charged with all 5 murders. But when brought to trial, Tandy's testimony was ruled inadmissible due to her status as an unreliable witness. Without any evidence to convict him, Robinson was set free. And, as far as anyone knows, he was never charged again. After that, the case went cold, and over the next few years, many theories emerged. One popular one claimed that the killer was a member of a local family, the Lovelaces, whose daughter had become pregnant by an unknown man. When the father refused to marry her, the Lovelace men kidnapped and killed her boyfriend as revenge. This theory was never proven, nor was any other one that came after it. There were plenty, including that the killer was a traveling salesman, a deranged priest, or even a woman seeking revenge for her sister, who had been murdered by a jealous lover. Even FBI agents were brought in at one point to try and find the killer, but to no avail. As of today, the case remains officially unsolved, and the identity of the Phantom Killer is still unknown. Despite that, the story was picked up by the media and quickly became an urban legend. In fact, the Texarkana Gazette ran a story about the Phantom Killer every week for almost a year straight, keeping the fear of the unknown alive in the minds of the community. For residents of Texarkana, it was the slasher movie before slasher movies existed. And it was this fascination with the case that inspired Victor Miller to write the screenplay for Friday the 13th. See, Miller had been stationed in Texarkana during World War II and had heard the local legends. So when he learned that the original story had been adapted into a film called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, he knew that he wanted to write a modern take on it. He worked closely with the film's director, Sean S. Cunningham, to ensure that the story was rooted in reality, drawing inspiration from the crimes of the Phantom Killer. As a result, the town of Crystal Lake in Friday the 13th is clearly based on Texarkana, and Jason Voorhees, the killer, is a composite of the unidentified murderer and the various suspects, especially John L. Robinson. Now, the differences are clear as well. While the Phantom Killer case involved 5 separate attacks, Friday the 13th has Jason killing a group of teenagers in one fell swoop. But again, that's what makes this the slasher movie before slashers existed. Because before Jason Voorhees, there was the Phantom Killer. Before Camp Crystal Lake, there was Highway 67. Before hockey masks, there was a simple white cloth. Before relentless killers, there was a killer that the police could never catch. Before I wrap things up, I want to give a quick shout-out to the channel for providing the research that helped me write this video. They have an awesome documentary on this very subject that I highly recommend you check out. And thanks to them, I've got one more piece of information that will hopefully put this whole thing to rest once and for all. Do you think the story of the Phantom Killer is real? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our new videos. I'll see you guys next time.